GDP, Gross Domestic Product, and Economic Welfare. GDP is the best single measure of the economic well-being of a society. GDP per person tells us the income and the expenditure of the average person in the economy. Higher GDP per person indicates a higher standard of living. GDP is not a perfect measure of the happiness or quality of life. It is indispensable knowledge for the policymakers for formulating macroeconomic policies such as monetary policy, fiscal policy, industrial policy, exchange rate policy, income policy, etc. Also, it explains economic dynamism and intricate interrelationship among macroeconomic variables such as price level, income, output, and employment. Methods of measuring national income. There are three methods of measuring national income: product or output method, income method, and expenditure methods. These are known as main or key methods of measuring national income: product method, income method, and expenditure method. Product methods is also known as the value added methods or industrial origin methods. And can be defined as the market value of all goods and services produced in the country by all the firms across all industries are added up together. This is how to measure the national income using product methods. The market value of all goods and services produced in the country. Income methods, from the other hand, means the net income received by all citizens of a country in a particular year. For example, total of net rent, net wages, net interest, and net profits. Actually, it is GDP at factor cost. The definition of income methods can be defined as the GDP at factor cost. So income methods is about the net income received by all citizens of a country in particular year, or GDP at factor cost. It is the income earned by the factors of production of a country. It is the income earned by the factors of production of a country. Last method is expenditure method. National income which can be arrived at by adding the total expenditure of individual and business firm during year. So, expenditure methods, national income which can be arrived at by adding the total expenditure of individual and business firms during a year. This is briefly the definition of three methods of measuring national income. How to measure national income? To measure national income, there are three ways: product way or methods, income methods or way, and expenditure methods. These three methods cannot be used interchangeably. Each of them has its characteristics and definition. Product or output methods. Product methods, as we mentioned before, is called value added methods. Or we can define it as the market value of all the goods and services produced in the country by all the firms across all industries and added up together. There is some steps of value added or product methods. The steps in measuring the product used in the product methods. Step 1: identification and classification of producing enterprises. Is how to use the product measure. First step is to identify and classify producing enterprises. Is primary sector, secondary sector, tertiary sector. Primary sector refers to that sector wherein goods are produced by exploiting natural resources. By exploiting natural resources. Otherwise known also as the main sector. The main sector. Secondary sector. This sector is also called manufacturing sector. Enterprises of this sector transform one type of good into another type. The third sector, tertiary sector, provides services and so is called service sector. trade, tourism, communication, etc. It includes trade, hotel, transport and communication, financing, insurance, etc. So, the first step in how to use the product method is a step of identification and classification of producing enterprises. So, we mean by the enterprises the prices in the sphere of primary sector and the prices in the sphere of secondary sector and the tertiary sector. So usually each economy include this sector: primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector. Okay, let's move to see what stands behind step 2. As we mentioned before, step 1 is about identification and classification of enterprises. Step 2, estimation of value added. Value added is the difference between value of output of an enterprise and the value of its intermediate consumption, non-factor inputs. So value added equal value of output negative value of non-factor input. Value of output negative value of non-factor input. Value of output equals sales plus change in stock. Sales plus change in stock. Value added may be on the following kinds. Value added may be on the following kinds: gross value added at market price, gross value added at market price. Gross value added is the difference between value of output and intermediate goods. So net value added at market price and net value added at factor price. Those three methods to measure the value added: net value added at market price and net value added at factor cost. The economy is divided on basis of industries such as agriculture, fishing, mining, large-scale manufacturing, small-scale manufacturing, electricity, gas, etc. The fiscal units of output are interpreted in money terms. The total values added up GDP at market price. The indirect taxes are subtracted and the subsidies are added GDP at factor cost. Net value is calculated by subtracting depreciation from the total value NDP at factor cost. Let's see the limitation of product methods. Problem of double counting and applicable to treasury treasury sector. Exclusion of non-market products or non-marketed products. Self-consumption of output. The market value of all the goods and services produced in the country by all firms across all industry are added up together. So, for limitation of product methods, problem of double counting and applicable to the treasury sector, exclusion of non-marketed products, self-consumption of output. These are the main limitation of product methods. Income methods, second methods of measuring national income. The net income means the net income received by all citizens of a country in a particular year. Income is the total income received by citizens of a country in a particular year. For example, total net rents, net wages, net interests, and net profits. Actually, the definition of income methods is a synonym of the definition of GDP at factor cost. It is income earned by the factors of production of a country. For example, rent is the factor of payback of land, wages for labor, profit for management, interest for investment, the rest for investment. So usually there are actually 4 factors of production: capital, labor, land or nature, and management. Rent for land, wage for labor, interest for capital, profit for management. So the payback of land is rent, the payback of labor is wage, the payback of capital is interest, the payback of management is profit. So this is actually the definition of GDP at factor cost. Actually, the cost of labor is wage, the cost of land is rent, the cost of capital is interest, the cost of management is profit. Add the money sent by the citizens of the nation from abroad and deduct the payments made to foreign nationals. So here the difference between domestic money received by foreigners and abroad money received by citizens. Do you know how to calculate these differences? So payments made to foreign nationals and payments made to citizens from abroad. Individuals also are sharing GNP at factor cost or gross national income. Gross national income, GNI. Somehow it can explain the income methods. So generally it is income received by all citizens of a country in particular year during usually 1 year. Payback of capital, payback of labor, payback of land, and payback of management. This is an income method. Now, this is the second product method, income method, and the last is expenditure method. These three methods are used to measure what? To measure national income. To measure national income. Okay. Let us develop the previous statements through this process. Economy is divided on the basis of income groups. Income groups. Wage or salary earns, rent earns, profit earns, interest earns, etc. So we consider salary as income as well as rent, profit, and interest. Income of all the groups is added. Income of all the groups is added. So the wages, rent, profit, and interest is considered as inflow, but income from abroad and undistributed profit is including of course, including income from abroad and undistributed profit. The income earned by the foreigners and transfer payments made in the year are subtracted. So therefore GNI equal rent plus wage plus interest plus profit plus income from abroad negative transfer payment. Income, net income from abroad, this is the difference between the income received by foreign nationals, the difference between the income received by foreign nationals and the income received by citizens abroad. This is what do we mean by net income from abroad. Negative transfer payment, which is it is not a cost or factor of production. Transfer payments is not considered as production factor cost. Okay, here are two methods to apply the income methods. Two steps to apply income methods. First step, identification and classification of producing enterprises. Primary, secondary and tertiary sector. This is the first step. Second step, classification of factor income. So, what do you mean by factor income? A factor income refers to income earned by a person as a reward for rendering his factor services. It's a household actually. Factor income is a factor refers to income earned by a person as a reward for rendering his factor services. Factor income are only earned incomes. Factor income are only earned incomes. It does not include that income which is not earned. So that means here we are talking about the rent, the wage, the interest and profit, because this income is earned because of the factor rendering. So the rendering of capital yields interest, the rendering of labor yields wage, the rendering of land yields rent, and the rendering of management yields profits. So the application of income methods includes these two steps: identification and classification of producing enterprises, these two sectors. Number two, classification of factor income. What is the factor income? Okay, received from the earning of the factor costs or factor payback factor income and factor and are only earn income. So these methods consider only, or the factor income considered only the income earned by rendering factor of production, and it does not include that income which is not earned by rendering the factor of production. Limitation of income method. Two limitations: exclusion of non-monetary income, ignorance the non-monetized section of economic activities. No partners here. No partner. Exclusion of non-marketed services. Exclusion of non-marketed services. What do we mean by non-marketed? It is not a subject for sell and buy. So what do we mean by non-marketed services? People undertake a particular activity that are difficult to ascertain in money value. For example, mother services to the family. So the exclusion of non-marketed services. Non-marketed services, it is not a subject to buy or to sell. Exclusion of non-monetary income. So the exchange of goods are not considered in the income methods. Okay, so the mediator of this relation is money. This what do we mean? Two limitations of income method: exclusion of non-monetary income. Number two, exclusion of non-marketed services. These are limitation of income. The rest is, of course, is expenditure method. Let's move to see what's stand behind the expenditure method, its definition, steps, and limitation. Definition, steps, and limitation. The last method is expenditure income. One man's income is another man's expenditure. Therefore, national income can be arrived at by adding the total expenditure of individual and business firms during a year. Expenditure or outlay on final products takes place in four ways. Expenditure by consumers on goods and services. Consumption expenditure. expenditure by entrepreneurs on capital or investment goods. This known as expenditure, investment expenditure. Expenditure by government on consumption and capital goods is known as government expenditure. And net export, the difference between export and import. Actually here we can assume that import is an expenditure. So there are four ways of expenditure: consumption expenditure, investment expenditure, government expenditure, and international trade expenditure. This role is very interesting. One man's income is another man's expenditure, or another man's expenditure is one man's income. The formula of the expenditure method is y equal c plus I plus g plus brackets x minus m, where y stands for total expenditure, c stands for consumption expenditure, I stands for investment expenditure, G stands for government expenditure, X negative M, difference between export and import, or net export. This is a formula or equation for the expenditure methods. C is consumption expenditure made by household sector, investing expenditure is investment demand, and government expenditure is government demand. Actually, X minus M, it is net export. Or the demand of international trade sector. So these are this is an equation or formula of expenditure method. Let's see the limitations. Neglects barter system, of course. Neglect barter system. Recognized only monetized system. Ignores overconsumption. Affected by inflation. Ignorance overconsumption affected by inflation. D'accord? Let's see the difficulties in calculation the national incomes and uses of data. In backward economies, particularly in the rural sector, the cultivators and small producers are illiterate and they do not keep books of account. Number one. Number two, avoidance of double counting becomes complicated. Number three, existence of non-monetized sector is dominant. Uses of data. National income is the most dependable indicator of country's economic health. National income is the most dependable indicator of a country's income health. Difference between GDP and GNP indicates a contribution of net income earned abroad. Necessary for economic planning, useful aid in judging which sectors should be given more emphasis. Helps in determining the regional disparities, income inequality, and level of poverty in a country. Summary. GDP or Gross Domestic Product is the sum of market values of all final goods and services produced within the domestic territories of a country during an accounting year. So it is market value of all final. Let's here make a stress on the following. Market value, final goods and services. Final goods and services. Not intermediate services, not intermediate or capital products or intermediate products. Final goods and services. So, market value, final goods and services produced in the domestic territory in Sudan only during an accounting year usually. GNP also is the aggregate final output of citizens and business of an economy in 1 year. Regardless the place of exploitation of the national factor of production. GDP is GNP less depreciation. GNP is a market value of all final goods and services produced by the national factor of production regardless the place of investment. So the average income of the people of a country in a particular year is per capita income for that year. The average income, the average the average income of the people of a country in a particular year is the per capita income for that year. Okay. National income can be measured by product methods, income methods, and expenditure method. These three methods used for measuring national income. It is product method, income method, and expenditure methods. National income is considered as a measure of economic welfare. National income is considered as a measure of economic welfare. As national income rises, the aggregate production of goods and services rises. Therefore, there is a positive relation between increases in national income and welfare. So, national income is considered as a measure of what? Of economic welfare. As national income rises, relation is positive here, direct. The aggregate production of goods and services rises all. So, the rise of aggregate production of goods and services leads to rise of national income. So the relation between high production of goods and services and national income is direct. It is direct relation. So national income is considered as a measure of economic welfare. As national income rises, the aggregate production of goods and services rises also. Therefore, there is a positive relation between increase in national income and welfare. Three variables. The production of goods and services, national income, okay, and welfare, economic welfare. The relation between these three variables are positive. The relation between these three variables is positive. So the curve which expresses the relation between the three variables is upward. Difficulties in measuring national income include multiple counting, number one, exclusion of non-marketed transacted services, self-consumption of output, inflation or deflation, confusion about informal sector and formal sector. These difficulties usually face the calculation of national income, including double accounting, exclusion of non-marketed transaction, self-consumption of output. This is a local home agriculture. Inflation or deflation, confusion about informal and formal sectors. This usually the difficulties which face the calculation of national income.